Welcome to Horseshoe Bend, an iconic place where over 1 million visitors come to see the dramatically beautiful views of the Colorado River and Glen Canyon. This ADA-accessible trail provides one of the best places for people from all walks of life to enjoy the majestic scenery of the Southwest. But this unforgettable place can be easily damaged and needs your help. Here are some ways you can practice Leave No Trace on your visit. Make sure to plan ahead and prepare. More than 250 people every month have medical emergencies at Horseshoe Bend, most related to heat. Water, sunscreen, and appropriate shoes are needed for a safe and enjoyable visit. The heat can be harmful to our furry friends too, so consider leaving your dog at home. Dogs at Horseshoe Bend must remain on a leash, and all dog poop should be packed out. The desert is a fragile place. Stay on the trail to protect vegetation and wildlife. Litter harms wildlife and pollutes the water and soil. Pack out everything that you pack in. Leaving your mark is overrated. Carving on sandstone leaves a permanent scar, even after it's removed, and ruins the natural beauty of the landscape for everyone. Drones are not allowed in all national parks. That includes Horseshoe Bend. Their noise can be disruptive to wildlife and other visitors. Bathrooms are available in the parking lot. Please do not go on the trail or at the overlook to minimize contamination and avoid social impacts. Thank you for helping to preserve your national parks and Horseshoe Bend. Enjoy your visit and leave no trace.
About 3/4 of a mile back to the parking lot, and from there you walk pretty much over relatively level ground to come out here to the edge. We're approaching the edge, so I wanted to start recording here. And let's move over here a little bit. There. Now as we get to the edge, they say it's about 1,000 feet down. I don't want to get too close to that edge. So we're going to have to go slowly and carefully, because you make a misstep here and trip and fall, and you're pretty much done for. So I don't want to get too close to the edge there. I'm going to look around, make sure there's nothing around me that's going to trip me. And then come ever so slowly. In fact, I might get down. I'm going to crouch down here because I want to look over the edge, but I don't want to fall over the edge. There are no railings. I may just lean over. I love mountains, but I hate heights. Holy cow, that's about all I'm gonna do. That thing goes straight down. There's a bird down there. I don't know if you can see it, but making things look so... I'm gonna get back from this, because this is starting to bother me. If I look too long there, then I'm gonna have problems. So I'm gonna move back here. Let's go back to this rock over here and look at the layers. Okay, we're over here next to this rock. There's something I have to tell you. I have a problem with my hands, and that is something like what was described in the book of Daniel many, many centuries ago, where a hand came out of the air, and it was just a hand. Well, that's kind of the problem I have with my hands. My hands are just hands, thanks to special effects. So I could have written on the wall in the book of Daniel, many, many tekel upharsin, which I think was translated something of the words numbered, weighed, divided. That the king was being warned for the last time by God that he needed to repent, and he didn't, and his kingdom was taken from him and divided up. Isn't it interesting that about 2,600 years ago or so, 2,500 years or so, the symbol that we use today, which is a universal standard of issuing commands, was used so long ago? It is as though God anticipated that. Yes, he did. He knew it in advance. So you're going to see me use my hands now as we do a couple projects here. And I didn't want to shock you by these, so. But I can pick up things. And I can put them there, and I can poke things. So we're going to go over here, and we're going to do a little experiment with rocks. Okay, so now we're going to play with a pile of rocks. The first thing I want you to see with these is see how the shadows are, so you can tell where the sun is in the sky based on the shadows. And as we pick up these rocks, you can see the shadow moves, stays consistent at the same angle. If I rotate the rock and the cross section changes in line with the sun, the shadow changes. Now, one of the things we do as kids is we'll play with rocks and we'll stack them up like this, and then maybe try to balance them a bit or something. But you notice how they, when they come into contact with each other, rocks, because they maintain their solid shape and they're not, practically speaking, they're not compressible, they'll transmit the force applied to them pretty much point by point contact. So they don't squish like Play-Doh does. And so what happens is these things are all different shapes. They're not like dominoes, they're not like regular pieces, and the center of gravity in each is different and fairly complex based on their odd shapes. And so when you apply a force to one edge, it goes through the piece and affects all the other pieces. Well, as a kid, you're just kind of looking at the rocks move. But the math behind how the forces propagate through the pile and each one affects the others, and as things start to shift a little bit, let's see how they shift here. It is quite amazing, the mathematics behind the physics of simple rock movements. Now, God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. But some people point out he didn't create the sun till day 4. So where did the light come from? Today I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you right now. So where does the light come from for these rocks? You look up in the sky, you can see the sun. It's blasting pretty much everything here. And it's hitting these little rocks too. But I'm going to take these and I'm going to put them in the dark. Ha ha, Mr. Sun, you won't be able to shine on them now. But look what happens. Wait a minute. There's light still shining on them. And it's not the sun. Now, how is it that light is hitting these rocks and yet the sun's rays aren't coming through the rock? How is that possible? Well, the reason it's possible is that this reality isn't what you think it is. Rutherford tried to tell us that about 100 years ago, and people kind of listened to him but went back to what they were doing. He said this reality isn't what you think it is. It's hollow. Well, it's more than just hollow. Where's the light coming from that's hitting these rocks? We could use the scientific method, and we could find that the source of light for everything around this appears to be this sun. We could run some tests, and it would, if the scientific method were used here, it would show that the rules always stay as they are, except for these little rocks. Why is it different for these little rocks? Well, there are rules for these rocks. And the rules for these rocks are that they be lit, that they be illuminated, let there be light. They were given the command, let there be light, And that was never taken away. And it was never taken away whether they were in the light, like this, or whether they were in the shadow, like this. Because this is not the world that you think it is. This is not millions of years old. This is about maybe 6 or 7 minutes old. This is a world created by words. Well, that's interesting. You can touch it. I can feel that here. It passes through to my hand. I can feel that edge there. I can feel just the edge as I just brush it. And I can push things here. And I can push them up, and they follow Newtonian physics fairly well. Except the light is a bug. Somebody forgot to turn it off when it goes in the shade. This is a world that runs by rules. I can walk around this world, and I can look at all kinds of things. I'm going to go back over here now. And I'm going to look at these. Look, I can look behind things here. How about that? So I'm going to walk over here. I can look behind things. So I can look behind this big rock and see where I was previously over there. And then I can walk back over there and I can see those rocks are still lit. Now, how long is that light going to last? You know what? It's going to last as long as the word is upheld. This is the Oculus world. This is made by software, by thoughts firmly held, and as long as the word is upheld, these things remain. And when I decide, because I'm controlling the Oculus, then this world ends. I turn it off, and it goes poof. I don't have to exert any energy on it. I don't have to go to great distances, because the distances aren't the same outside this. This is a world made by words. This is how it acts. These hands here are very basic. I can feel touch, but I can't do a whole lot with them. I can pick up rocks and put them down, and I can push the rocks with my fingertips, and I can feel them with my thumb or the fingers, but not much more, until we get better hands for this world. But you know what we do in software? We have two versions of languages. We have a high-level language and a low-level language. And the high-level language is one that you can read through. It's like reading a script, and it describes the overall broad actions that will be taken, such as let there be canyons, and suddenly they appear. But all the details of what's carried out, like the layers, the river, the algae, the birds, that's at a lower level language, and that ends up being the ones and zeros, which are still used by computers to carry things out. Millions and millions and millions of ones and zeros. They contain information of what's there, the definitions of how it works, the considerations of what happens if certain events occur, how the wind should act, how the water should act, how the rocks should act, how I move in this reality, how my hands look, because my hands here are being operated by something outside this reality. They're being operated by me, and I'm outside this reality. But if I were born here and only saw these, I'd probably think, well, that's all I am. Strangely enough, we're doing exactly what the Bible describes. The Bible in Genesis 1 uses the commands, let there be. That's what I used when I was 14, starting the basic programming language. That's what we used to have to use to define everything in our software. And it was about 2 years later that they changed the language, and the word let disappeared and was gone soon thereafter. So we use high-level languages the way Genesis 1 used a language to describe to us what God was doing. It was carried out on a more detailed level, and it lasts as long as He decides. I do not have to supply any energy to this reality to make it work. The Oculus itself runs on a battery. But what it's doing is it's basically maintaining thoughts. And you could use any structure of thoughts that we can come up with to hold this information that makes this world. Now the thing is, the Oculus, which is a computer inside a headset, a computer is the model of a mind, a model of a perfect mind. If you had a perfect mind, you could do all the things the Oculus does and more using your mind. So does God use a computer? I don't think so. I think he uses his mind. How real is the reality he creates? Well, it's absolute. It gives you absolute power. It also gives you omnipresence. You have access to everything automatically. I can touch these things. I can feel these things in this reality. And that's the main sense that we use to decide whether something's real or not. Because if you just see something, you could say it's a mirage. But if you can touch it, and if everybody else in the reality can touch it, that's what we use to conclude that these things really exist. And we can run all kinds of tests on them to verify, but what we're doing is we're verifying the rules that are written for the reality. This is exactly how God describes our reality, built by words, firmly upheld, and that is exactly what the Oculus does. Now, we earlier looked at the concept of how rocks just being pushed against each other tend to propagate forces through them. And if you look at our reality as existing naturally, you wouldn't even consider that the forces matter particularly when you apply a force to one and how the others change. But what happens is if you consider this a virtual reality that's being upheld by God, suddenly all these things become active. And everything that we do in this reality, he, by upholding his word, has to do all the calculations and adjustments of pieces so that every little movement of every piece, every atom, every electron, every subatomic particle, is known, measured, accommodated by whatever forces are applied to it. So when the little kids play with rocks and see them tumble, there is so much going on in the way of Newtonian physics and mathematics. If you had to do it with pen and paper, you would struggle to come up with exactly how does the force propagate from one piece to the next. And yet, if you look at our reality as virtual, as artificial, because God says it did not exist on its own. He created it, and he created everything in it. There are no laws except the ones that he defined. So when you look at it that way, you see not only is God still active, he is incredibly active in upholding his creation, because he upholds all the rules, and that means that he's taking into account all the adjustments and applying. When we make the decision to push, it's his processing of those requests that that makes the changes in the rock pile as everything shifts. Now, some might argue, well, God rested on the seventh day. It was a Sabbath, so how could he do anything if he's resting? Because if the little rock pile moves, or if the wind blows or something, then he's working. Well, let me ask you this. If you observe the Sabbath as a person, and do no work on the Sabbath, does your heart still beat? Do you still breathe? So in the basic physical sense, you're still working. But in the practical sense of a Sabbath, if you do no regular labor, then you're not working. So your heart's beating, you're breathing, your cells are still functioning, your whole system is working, and working hard as much as it does on other days, unless your labor's physically intensive. So you're in that sense you were working on the Sabbath. But if you observe the Sabbath strictly, you're not working if you don't do any regular work. Well, the same with God. He didn't do anything special on the Sabbath. He didn't make anything in particular, but he did uphold his creation. And you could put that in the same category as our hearts still continue to beat and we continue to breathe. And if it weren't for God upholding our reality, we wouldn't be doing those things either. So it makes you think. However, if you look at things as a virtual reality, suddenly the amount of work that God has to do, mentally at least, is just absolutely extraordinary. It's hard to fathom all that he does for us. That we take for granted. Makes you think. And from the description in the Bible, we get the understanding that we were made by God's Spirit. It's interesting that God said he saw the light, and it was, and that's a technical description because he did not describe a body yet. So spirits can sense. So your body is an interface which was created for this time, and your spirit was given access to it, but it's also limited by it, so you don't have the full view that God has. But you see through what the eyes of this body see, and only those eyes for the present time. But the fact that your spirit can sense things allows a world to be created like this. That's today's Bible study. Where did the light come from before day 4? It came by the same light that lights that sun, God's rules. And when you take this off, you find out that the space that you thought was there, the distance that you thought was there, the weight of these mountains that you thought was there, the energy output that you thought was there was really all governed by rules. It was governed by God's word firmly upheld. Have a good day.